To what extent did the first industrial revolution in Britain lead Europe to thrive and further deepen the great divergence between Europe and Asia? The mass production, creation of steam engines, and the high wages in Britain caused the great improvements towards economic and social lives. It also created incentives for people to make new inventions, which result the Europe's economic and social developments to eventually exceed China, while China was still struggling from stagnation that was caused by their conservative and isolated society.
The British textile industry in the 18th century became one of the key factors of innovation that led the Industrial Revolution. As a series of inventions were invented, it was once complicated and inefficient before the age of mechanization. Yet the invention of the flying shuttle in 1733 by John Kay has largely increased the speed of weaving and resulted in the increase in production of the textile industry. This invention later causes such other inventions like the spinning jenny from James Hargreaves and the water frame that was invented by Richard Arkwright. The spinning jenny helped to enable individuals to produce multiple threads simultaneously, so as the water frame utilizes water as a power source in order to further speed up the process of production of the industry. This advancement of textile industry in Britain had innovated the Industrial Revolution and its process of mechanization. The utilization of machines has inspired English thinkers and engineers to invent other technologies that could mass-produce products that require less energy sources. This further helped Europe to be able to produce textile and other industrial products more easily and efficiently. Moreover, inventions had also inspired the use of non-human powered resources. In an example of the water frame, it was supported by a water mill that was powered by water. This kind of utilization of natural resources as the main power of production later influenced and enabled Europeans to utilize other economically cheap and efficient resources, which then further helped Europeans to be more capable of mass-producing products. As always, you can't neglect the steam engine when talking about the Industrial Revolution. The invention of the steam engine was what made this revolution revolutionary, as it influenced numerous amount of factories and industries to rely on the source of steam power. During the Industrial Revolution, steam power was one of the most relied sources of any kinds of industries, as it later replaced most of the water-powered factories. The first industrial use of steam power was first introduced by Thomas Savery in 1698. In 1712, Thomas Newcomen developed the first practical steam engine where he used it to pump water out from coal mines. As something to be mentioned, steam engines were mostly powered by coal during the Industrial Revolution. Thus, by pumping more water out from coal mines means more coal to support more steam engines. In addition, by the 1770s, John Watt established a more efficient steam engine that could be used to power other machineries. The use of steam engines helped Europe to be capable of mass-producing products. This practical and efficient engine and its application toward industry basically rooted the industrialization and mechanization of Europe. Also, steam power and engines resulted other consequences of significant developments during the Industrial Revolution, such as railroads, steel, and the excavation of coal. It sped up the overall production of industry, as it eventually became the heart of the Industrial Revolution.
High wages in Britain is also one of the most influential factors that further improves the Industrial Revolution in ways like making it economically efficient, since the energy sources such as coal and lead were mass-producing, and which influenced the price of these energy sources to decrease, which created strong incentives for people in Britain into funding machines, since machines were considered as a cheap way into mass-producing products and gaining massive profits at the same time. The main factor of creating the high wages in Britain was mainly because of the Black Death, as it decreased the population, creating a lower supply of workers and a strong demand for wages. Not only the Black Death facilitated the creation of high wages in Britain, the high amount of natural resources such as coal and lead also influenced the increase of wages by providing a much more cheaper cost for natural resources. The wages in Britain were about 11 grams of silver per day, whereas in comparison to other countries like Beijing, Amsterdam, and Venice were all below 9 grams per day. And also, the people in Britain lived a better life due to their high wages that influenced their way of high standards of living. The high wages in Britain highly affected on how the British people think about mass production by making it a much more cheaper price for natural resources, factories, and machineries, which greatly increased the manufacturing of Britain. It eventually created a positive cycle of high wages making the mass manufacturing cheap, which the mass manufacturing connects to the increase of Britain's economy, and which further increases the wages in Britain. And by this, great incentives attracted more British people into creating inventions, and which eventually led to the Industrial Revolution. China's stagnation was mainly caused by their superior beliefs of their people, which facilitated the stoppage of China's development, and also the conservative ideas that they produced, which made them view enforcing their land is more important than expanding their territory, which is also a factor that facilitated the stoppage of developments in China. The superior and arrogant minds of the Chinese and the conservative minds of the Chinese led the Chinese to have no desire in colonizing other people as the Western did. The Chinese viewed the Westerners as barbarians, suggested that the conservative thoughts of the Chinese. Although China was prosperous by the fact that their great development in worldwide trade and other manufacturing such as China's and textiles, the isolation of China greatly decreased the development and stagnated the prosperity of China because of the lack of communication towards other greatly developed countries such as Britain, and eventually led to the stagnation of China. The start of the isolation of China was facilitated by their conservative minds, which is the thought of protecting and enforcing their homelands, and to make sure the high standard life of their people, instead of expanding their territory and colonizing other countries. And the arrogant mind, which made them think that it is unnecessary to develop furthermore, since they believe that they are the most superior people, and view the Westerners as barbarians. And by this, the development of industrial and economic stagnated and showed a great gap between China and other countries. The huge developments and improvement on economic and social states in Europe was made because of the Industrial Revolution and the stagnation of China, because of their conservative minds and superior self-esteem. The great divergence commenced and gradually became more visible as Europe continued to develop in the Industrial Revolution, while China continues to stagnate during the restrictions made by the isolation of China. As previously mentioned, Britain benefited from the Industrial Revolution in economic and social ways by benefiting from the mass manufacturing and also the new innovations, which led to a series of new inventions, and further on influenced the factories and machineries into a more cheap and efficient and likable form of business. The benefit from the Industrial Revolution were massive not only to the middle and upper class people, but also to the working class. Although the working class during the Industrial Revolution were forced to do labor work, but because of the Industrial Revolution, they were able to gain job opportunities in order for them to earn money for their families. On the other hand, China's stagnation, as talked about earlier, their superior minds made them unwilling to develop further and made them to lose interest on towards competing with other countries around the world, which in result created a great differentiation between China and Europe's development, and further on influenced the Great Divergence.